Hello, welcome to part 1 of a set of 4 videos showing you how to work this small square coaster. You can see that this one is a sample, and the 4 different quarters have got a different pattern each. I've produced a pattern pack which gives you all 4 separate variations of the design plus the pattern for the sampler. You get a front sheet which tells you the threads and how many pairs you need, and a colour photograph of the lace. You get a pattern sheet which also has a starting diagram, and you also get the prickings printed onto 230 GSM buff cardstock that you can then prick and use directly. These are the 4 separate designs, and you can see in the samples I've worked here, I've varied the stitches in the different quarters to give you an idea of the different effects that you can get just by changing a slight detail about the pattern. So let's get started on the first quarter. You can see on my pricking I've drawn a red line going diagonally across in both directions. This marks out the quarters of the piece, and you can use this for any sized solid square design, and it just helps to guide you which section and where you need to work next. So for example, for the first quarter you will work everything between those 2 red lines before you turn and start the next piece, but I will show you that as I go along. So this piece takes 19 pairs, and if we look at our working diagram, we can see that we need to use 3 pairs at the top of the fan, and then 1 pair for each of the pinholes working down that line. And that's the diagonal line just below this red line on the pattern. So to start with, I'm going to hang 2 pairs to sit open like a rainbow around a pin in that top pinhole. So there's 1 and there's 2. I'm going to twist the left hand pair twice, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use something called magic threads. This is to help us when we come to sew in at the end, because you're going to need to sew 2 pairs into that pinhole, and it can get very tight and is quite difficult to get your hook in to make the sewing. So I'm going to use 2 magic threads because I've got 2 pairs that I'm going to need to sew in at the end, and I've cut 2 lengths of thread. These are the same thickness as the thread I'm using, and they're in 2 different colours. So I'm going to fold the thread in half. The thread is about 12 inches or 30 centimetres long. I'm going to fold the thread in half to put the 2 ends together, and then I'm just going to tie a simple knot in the end of the two ends, so that I have a knot here and a loop at the other end. I'm then going to slide this magic thread up underneath the left hand pair of bobbins, and I've got the knot to the back and the loop to the front. Then I'm going to catch through the loop and through the knot with a pin, and then I'm going to pin this to the back of the pillow quite tight to the thread, so that the thread sits, so that your pairs sit over the pin and your magic thread is sitting at the back of the pillow. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the second magic thread. I'm going to tie a knot in the end. Slide the magic thread up under the pair on the left on the outside. Catch the loop and the knot end through a pin, and holding my pair, I'm going to pin that to the back of the pillow. The thread I'm using to work this piece is Presentia Finca 40. It comes with a pink wrapper, like so, and comes in a small range of colours, but it does come in a range of colours. This is the thread I've used in the sample. If you have it as an alternative, the DMC Special Dentelle 80 is a very good substitute, and this is actually really nice because it's a very firm thread. It will really hold a nice crisp piece of lace. As you will see from my sample, I've mounted it into a glass coaster with a piece of velvet backed paper behind it. These are available in the UK from Harlequin Lace, and I'll put the link in the description of the pattern. And they give a nice protection to your piece of lace so that you can use it as a coaster. So now we've got our magic threads in place, we can start to work our fan and get our pairs in for our first fan. In the working diagram, it shows us that we need 3 pairs for this top pinhole, and as you can see, so far I've only got 2. So to put the third in, which will be an extra passive to work around the outside edge of this fan, I'm just going to pop a pin in a hole that I've made halfway between the first and second pinholes of the fan. I'm going to hang a pair on this, and then for the remaining pairs for the fan, I'm going to hang 1, 2, 3, 4 pairs on support pins on the pinhole above the one that we're going to work for the fan. And I'm going to do a cloth stitch fan with a cloth stitch and twist edge stitch. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. Most torchon patterns will start in this way. Because you're working torchon on a 45-degree angle, you will find a line in the pattern that works best to hang your pairs in. If you're doing an edging, as I mentioned in my other video for the simple fan and spider edging, you don't want to work it from the corner, you want to find a spot a little way down the edge. But in a square, it makes sense and it's neater to just work it in 4/4. So we're following that line along the corner. So we're ready to start the fan. So I'm going to take the worker pair, which is this pair on the left hand side, and I'm going to work in cloth stitch and twist through the first pair. Then I'm going to work in cloth stitch through our extra passive for the fan, and then cloth stitch through the first pair to bring in from the right hand side. I'm going to twist the worker twice, and I'm going to place the pin. Now I have found that instead of placing the pin under just the worker on this start line, if I place it on under the worker and the first thread of the passive, it gives me a better finish when I come to the end of my lace, and I can show you this on one of the samples that I worked. So on this piece, for the first part, I pinned just under the worker, and can you see the passive has pulled in, and you get a little step in the edge of the lace when you're at the finishing point. So for the second half of this, I've pinned, as I'm doing now, under the worker and one of the passive threads, and it just helps to keep that a neater finish when you come to tie off at the end. So I've pinned under my worker and my outside thread, and now I'm going to work back to the outside edge of the piece of lace. So cloth stitch through 1, 2 pairs, then I'm going to put a twist on the worker ready to work the edge stitch. Then I'm going to work cloth stitch and twist with an extra twist on the worker and pin up under the worker on the outside edge. It's worth noting that I am following the working line that's drawn out on my pattern, which tells me which direction the worker goes. So if your worker pair is coming from a pin and it's not following a line, you've made a mistake somewhere along the line. So now I'm going to come back in from the edge. So cloth stitch and twist, so cross, twist, and you'll see I just tensioned up a little there. Then I'm going to work through 1, 2, and bring in the next pair, so 3, twist twice, and I'm going to take out the pin I had for the support pin for the previous pair that came in, and I'm going to pin under the worker and the outside thread of the passive in the next pinhole down. Then back to the outside, so cloth stitch, 2, 3, put a twist on my worker, cloth stitch and twist with the outside pair, extra twist on my worker, and pin up under the worker on the outside. Now I'm just going to tension gently, and you can just see that the pair that I had on the support pin previously, the little loop has now pulled down to the work. So continuing along the line, so cloth stitch and twist, then this time it's 1, 2, 3, 4 pairs, so that's the next new one in. Twist the worker twice, then I'm going to lift the previous support pin and pin under my worker and outside passive. Back to the outside, cloth stitch through 1, 2, 3, 4, place my twist on the worker, work my edge stitch of cloth stitch and twist with an extra twist on the worker and pin. Again, I'm tensioning, and I'm tensioning that extra pair that we've got in, that extra passive. I'm just tensioning out to follow the curve, so that the threads, as much as I can, follow the curve of the fan to give a nicer shape to it. So back, cloth stitch and twist, tension that edge, then 1, 2, 3, 4, and the last pair in cloth stitch for the new one coming in for the tip of the fan. Twist my worker twice, take out the previous support pin and pin under the worker and the first passive thread. So now we're at the widest point of our fan. So we're going to work across and back, and the next time we come back we're going to start leaving pairs out. So cloth stitch through the left, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, twist the worker once, cloth stitch and twist, extra twist on the worker and pin. Tension up, and I'm just giving a gentle tug on each individual thread, and then we'll come back. So cloth stitch and twist, then this time we're coming back through 1, 2, 3, 4, and not the last pair. We're going to leave that out because our fan is coming narrower now. So I'm going to take out that support pin, twist my worker twice and pin under the worker. And now we're just pinning normally under the worker at the end of each row. So returning cloth stitch, 1, 2, 3, 4 pairs this time, twist the worker once, cloth stitch and twist with an extra twist on the worker and pin up. Coming back, cloth stitch and twist through the first pair, then 1, 2, 3 pairs, making sure we leave the next pair out as the fan narrows. Twist the worker twice, pin under the worker, and we'll have a little tension up here again before coming back. So 1, 2, 3 pairs in cloth stitch, twist the worker once, cloth stitch and twist, extra twist on the worker and pin. Cloth stitch and twist back, then 1, 2 pairs this time, leaving the third pair out. Twist the worker twice and pin. And then back to the outside one more time, cloth stitch through 1, 2 pairs, twist the worker once, cloth stitch and twist, extra twist on the worker, and we're pinning here, and that is the last point of our fan. So I'm going to leave that there, and then your worker is ready to start the next fan when we've completed the spider. So to work the spider, we need 1, 2, 3, 4 pairs to come in from the fan, which we've got here, 1, 2, 3, 4. And they're coming out of cloth stitch, so we need to put 1 twist on each of those pairs. So when you're moving from one section to another, you need to make sure there is a twist on the threads. So those are our 4 pairs from the left, and now we need 4 pairs from the right. So I'm going to put a support pin, again, in the pinholes behind that red line, which I've drawn on the pattern. I'm going to put 4 pins for the spider, and on each pin I will hang a pair of bobbins. So we've now got 4 pairs to come in from the right, and we'll have 4 pairs from the left. So we've got, to make our spider, we've got 2 lines of ground, one here and one here, then the spider itself, and then 2 lines of ground to finish. So to start with, we're going to work the first line of ground down to the right, and this will bring in all our new pairs. So looking at the pinhole, I'm going to take the pair to the left and the pair diagonally to the right to work that pin. And I'm going to work half stitch, so cross twist, place a pin in the pinhole, and then close it with half stitch again, cross, twist. That is our half stitch ground. Then I'm going to move the left hand pair out of the way, and I'm going to bring a new pair in from the right. And we're going to do the same again. Half stitch. I'm going to take the support pin from the previous pinhole out, place that in my pinhole, half stitch to close. Move the left pair out, bring the next pair in from the right. Half stitch, use the pin from the support pin, pin in the middle and half stitch to close. You can see that I'm not putting a twist on these pairs from the right. That's because as soon as you work the half stitch and drop the pin down, take the support pin out, any twist you put on there will come undone. So bring the next pair in, half stitch, pin, half stitch to close. And we can take that last support pin out and let that drop down onto the pinhole. So we've now got our line of 4 ground stitches. So there's the pair that's worked through them and the 4 ground stitches. And we're going to come up and we're going to work the remaining 3 pairs in the ground coming to the left. So again, I'm looking at the pinhole I'm going to work, and I'm looking up for the pair coming diagonally into it from the left and the pair coming diagonally into it from the right. I'm going to work half stitch, pin between the pairs and half stitch to close. Bring the next pair in from the left, work half stitch, pin, half stitch to close. Bring the next pair in from the left, half stitch, pin, half stitch to close. So now we're ready to work our spider. So we've got the 2 outside ground pairs, then we've got 1, 2, 3 pairs on the right and 1, 2, 3 pairs on the left. Now our spider, if we look at the diagram, our spider shows us, and if I grab this variation from the pattern, you can see we've got 2 legs from the left and 2 legs from the right. So because we've got 2 legs, we want to make sure there are 2 twists on each leg. That's a good rule of thumb for working spiders, is the number of twists correlates to the number of legs on each side. So these have already got 1 twist on from the ground, so I'm going to put an extra twist on those 2 pairs, and then the 2 from the right, an extra twist on those 2 pairs. The 3rd pair on either side will form the bottom lines of ground, so we don't need to worry about those yet. So I'm going to work a cloth stitch spider using these 4 pairs. So to work a spider, as I've shown in previous video, we need to cloth stitch the 2 left hand pairs through the 2 right hand pairs, then we place a pin in the middle, and then we do the same again with the pairs that are now on the left going through the pairs that are now on the right, before we put our final 2 twists on each leg. So counting the pairs from left to right, I'm going to take pair number 2 and I'm going to cloth stitch through 2 pairs to the right and leave it there. Then I'm going to come back and I'm going to pick pair number 1 and I'm going to cloth stitch through 2 pairs to the right. So you can see now that we've got 2 pairs crossing through 2 pairs there. I'm going to take a pin and I'm going to pin in between the 2 centre pairs. Now I'm going to do the same again. So the 2nd pair I'm going to take through 2 pairs to the right in cloth stitch. Then I'm going to go back and pick the 1st pair up and go through 2 pairs to the right in cloth stitch. So you can see now we've got our little spider body tucked up around our pin. Now I'm going to put 2 twists on each of the legs, and now we can work our ground. So I'm going to work the left hand ground first. So I'm going to bring my ground pair in from the left hand side, half stitch, pin, half stitch, lay that pair out to the left, bring the next pair in, half stitch, pin, half stitch. That's as far as I can go, because at this stage there's nothing ready coming from the left. So I'm going to move across to the next pinhole available to work on the right, sorry, not the left, the right. And I'm going to work this pinhole. So I've got a pair coming from the right from the ground, and then I've got my first leg from the spider coming into the left hand side. So half stitch, pin, half stitch, move the pair out to the right, bring the next one in, half stitch, pin, half stitch, move the pair out, bring the next one in, half stitch, pin, half stitch, and just gently tension on all of those, and our spider's now complete. So now I'm going to move the spider pairs out of the way, the right hand spider pairs. The left hand spider pairs are going to be ready to come into my left hand fan. And then I've got my extra fan passive, my edge pair, my inside twisted edge pair, and my worker. So now I'm going to pick up the worker, and in exactly the same way as I did before, I'm going to work the fan in cloth stitch. So cloth stitch and twist, cloth stitch through our extra pair, and then I'm going to bring the first pair in from the spider. Twist my worker twice and pin. Working out 1, 2, twist, cloth stitch and twist, extra twist and pin. Cloth stitch and twist back, just tension up, then 1, 2, 3 pairs, bringing the next pair in, twist twice and pin. Back to the outside edge, cloth stitch and twist and pin. Come back in, so 1, 2, 3 and a new one, 4, twist twice and pin. So I shall carry on taking them in till I get to the widest point, then leave them out till I get down to the bottom in exactly the same way as I did in that first fan. And here we are again at the bottom of the fan. So I'm going to place that last pin and leave that open, ready for the next fan when I come along. So I can move my worker and my edge twisted pair and my extra passive out of the way. These next 4 pairs will come into the trail, so I'm going to put a twist on each of those, and then I should have my 4 pairs from the spider, and they will already have a twist on because they work to the ground. So now I'm going to work this trail. You could work it in cloth stitch, but so that I can show you how to add pairs in half stitch, I'm going to work this trail in half stitch. So we need 1, 2, 3 pairs to come in for these pinholes. So again, I'm going to put a support pin on the adjacent pinhole behind that red line, and I'm going to hang one pair on each of those pins. So my working line tells me that after the first pinhole the worker is going to go off to the left hand side. So this pair here coming from the left will be my worker. So I'm going to work in half stitch through the pair coming in from the right. Then I'm going to put an extra twist on the right hand pair, which was the left one coming in from there, and I'm going to place a pin underneath the worker, and only underneath the worker in half stitch. The tip I showed you earlier is only for cloth stitch. In half stitch it doesn't work. So I've placed my worker and I'm going to work back in half stitch through one and bring another one in from the left, extra twist on my worker and pin up, coming back, half stitch through 1, 2 and 3, bringing a new one in, twist the worker once. I'm going to take out that support pin above and pin under my worker, then back, half stitch through 1, 2, 3, 4, bring the next one in, twist the worker one more time and pin up. So coming back, 1, 2, 3, 4 and the next one 5, extra twist on my worker, take that support pin out and pin under the worker. You can tension up. Now looking back across my line of half stitch, you should be able to see that I have a single thread that works all the way across the row, which is my leading worker pair, or the leading thread from the worker, and then underneath each of the pairs has got a single twist on it. It's a good idea to check sometimes when you're working half stitch that this is the case, because if you don't have that single twist on each pair underneath, when you come to work back, your threads are going to start heading in the wrong direction and then you'll get a hole. So it's very important with half stitch that you have that single thread going across and then each pair of passives has a single twist on it. So I'm going to come back, half stitch through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and bring the next one in, 6, extra twist on my worker and pin. So we've got all our 3 pairs in on the right hand side, so our trail is coming in on this right hand side now. So whilst we'll continue picking up a pair on the left, when we get to the right hand side we need to leave one out. So I'm going to come back in half stitch, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to leave that pair out. I'm going to pick up the pin that was the support pin, put an extra twist on my worker and pin under my worker. So now I'm going to continue taking a pair in on the left hand side each time and leaving a pair out on the right hand side. So come back, leave that pair out, extra twist on the worker and pin, come back, extra one in on this side, extra twist on the worker and pin, then back in half stitch leaving that pair out there, extra twist on the worker. Back to the left. Bringing the pair in, extra twist on the worker and pin. And back to the right. Leaving that pair out, extra twist on the worker and pin. Back to the left. Take in our last pair because that's the widest point of our trail, extra twist on the worker and pin. And I'm going to leave that trail there because we've come as far as we can before we do this spider here. So I've got to that point and it's a useful place to stop. So I'm going to shuffle those pairs around to the left and we're going to look at, even one behind, we're going to look at our next spider. So for our next spider we need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pairs to come in from the left. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are coming out of our trail. And we're going to need 5 pairs, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 coming in from the right. And again, I'm going to put some pins on the support pins on the other side of that line. And we will put our remaining 5 pairs onto those pinholes. So now, exactly as we did before, we're going to work the first lot of ground stitches. So we're going to bring the top pair from the left and we're going to work it through the ground stitches on the right to bring in these new pairs. So half stitch, pin, half stitch, take out the support pin from the previous pair, pin, half stitch, pin, half stitch, pin, half stitch, and the last one, half stitch, pin, half stitch, and we can take out that last support pin. So all our pairs are now in the lace for this piece. We've got our line of ground going down there, and we need to look to do the line of ground on the left hand side. So again, I'm looking at the pinhole, I'm looking to the pair from the left diagonally and the pair from the right diagonally, and I'm going to work half stitch, pin, half stitch, and I'm going to come down this left hand line as far as I can go. So I can't go any further there because that's the trail. So now we can work this spider. So this spider's a bit bigger than the previous one. So we've got 1, 2, 3 legs on each side. So 1, 2, 3 legs. We've got our out of the ground pairs 2 there. And then we've got 1, 2, 3 legs from the right and our 2 outer ground pairs there. So we're going to work with the 2 lots of 3 in the middle. They all have a single twist on each, but because there are 3 legs on each side, I'm going to add another 2 so that each leg has got 3 twists. So again, the same principle for the spider, but in this case we've got 3 pairs on the left which need to work through the 3 pairs on the right. So 1, 2, the 3rd pair in, and we're going to take that to the right through 3 pairs in cloth stitch. Then coming back, we go 1, 2, the 2nd pair in, and take that through 3 pairs to the right in cloth stitch. Then we're going to come back to the final pair, the 1st pair, and we're going to take that through 3 pairs in cloth stitch. So now we have 3 pairs from each side worked through each other. We can place the pin in the middle, and we can repeat the process to cross the 3 pairs from the left with the 3 pairs from the right again at the bottom. So 1, 2, the 3rd pair in, and we'll take that 3 pairs to the right. Come back to the 2nd pair in, and we'll take that through 3 pairs to the right. And then come back for the 1st pair and take that through 3 pairs to the right. So there's our body of our spider done. We can put our twists on the legs, so that's 3 twists on each leg. One, two, 3. And to finish off, we're going to work our ground. So I'm going to work the left hand ground first, and I'm looking at the pinhole. Again, I'm looking for the pair coming from the left to then work with the 1st leg from the right. So half stitch, pin, half stitch, half stitch, pin, half stitch, half stitch, pin, half stitch. So that's as far as I can go on the left, and now I'm going to go to the right hand pinhole, the top pinhole, ready to work, and I'm looking to the pair that comes into that pinhole from the right hand side and the pair from the spider that comes in from the left, and we're going to work down that line, half stitch, pin, half stitch, half stitch, pin, half stitch, half stitch, pin, half stitch, and the last one. So now that's our spider done. So looking at the pattern, the next thing to do is to carry on with this ground, because we can't do the fans yet because we need the pairs from the trail to go into the fan. So I'm going to move these legs, these right hand side of the spider out of the way, shuffle these pairs to the right because these are the ones that are going to come into our trail, and we're going to return to where we left off working the trail. So as I go across, I'm just making sure that these passive pairs have each got a twist on them, and now I'm at the end. This is the one that is my worker. So I'm going to come in to the right in half stitch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if we look at this pinhole, the pin diagonally above it is already worked. So we don't want to take a pair in, because if we take the next pair in, that's this one, it's going to push it up to the wrong angle. We always need to come in at a 45-degree angle. So this one pin in the middle of the trail, where the trail turns, we're not going to take anything in there because it's already in. So I'm going to put an extra twist on the worker and pin. And we can see on the left hand side our trail is coming in to the right, so when we come out to the edge we're going to need to leave a pair out. So half stitch, leave that pair behind, extra twist on the worker and pin. So coming back, this time when we come to the pin we have a pair at 45 degrees diagonally coming into it. So now we'll take one in, extra twist and pin. So back to the left hand side, and again we're going to leave one out, extra twist to the worker and pin. Back to the right and bring one in. So we'll continue in this way, taking a pair in on the right hand side and leaving one out on the left until we get closer to the bottom. So half stitch. And you can see I'm not putting a lot of tensioning on this half stitch because it does have a tendency, it does really tension itself. So just as I'm working, just the pressure that I'm putting on that worker pair is tensioning that half stitch. So I've taken one in and I'm working back to the left. So you can see as I work, that tension that I'm putting on that worker is bringing that tension into that half stitch. So we come back, then bring one in, extra twist on the worker and pin. Leaving one out. Come back and take one in. So you can see that's the last pair, because these are all heading in the other direction. That's the last pair that we're coming in, because that's the widest point at the right of our trail. So from now on, we're going to be leaving a pair out at every pinhole. Leave that one out, extra twist. Leave a pair out at the right. And then the final one, leaving one out at the left. Extra twist and pin. And at the bottom of the trail, I'm going to close that with a half stitch. So now our trail is complete. We have a pair coming out at each pinhole, either coming out to the left here or to the right here or to the left here. And we're now ready to continue on and go back to our left hand fan. So coming back to the fan, I'm going to pick up, I'm going to work this fan, and then the pairs will be coming out of the fan in order to do the ground and then the spider. And then I'll be able to work this fan, and that'll be this quarter complete, and I can show you how to turn the corner. So I've now worked as far as I can all the way to the bottom of this first section. So I've done a whole quarter of the piece, and now we need to turn the lace ready to start the next quarter. So if I show you on my pattern, at the corner I've got an extra pinhole here, and that's just to help the worker get round from the bottom of this fan and then into the top of the first fan of the second side. So we're going to do that first, and then we're going to turn the pillow ready to start the next section. So with my worker, I'm going to do cloth stitch and twist through the edge pair, and I'm going to work cloth stitch through our extra fan passive, twist my worker twice, and I'm going to pin in that extra little pinhole in the corner, and then I'm going to come back through my fan passive, twist the worker, work my edge stitch, extra twist on the worker, and then I'm going to pin in the top pinhole, what will be the top pinhole of the fan coming down the next quarter. So we're now ready. We've done everything we can on this quarter of the lace. So now we're going to turn the pillow 90 degrees. I'm going to just lift the pillow and turn it round 90 degrees to the right, like so. And then I'm going to take the bobbins on the cover cloth and slide them round into position underneath the work. So now we're ready to start the next section, and that will come in part 2. And in the second video for the next section, I'm going to be showing you how to work the quarter for this pattern, which has got a fan edge, which I'm going to work in half stitch this time. We've got 2 spiders again, which I think I'll keep in cloth stitch. Then I'm going to introduce a rose ground, and then I'm going to do a spider, which will probably be a haloed spider in this case. So before we do that, the first thing I'm going to do, or the last thing I'm going to do that now, is I'm just going to push a few pins down. I'm going to push all the starch row, and I'm going to pop them right down into the pillow. Then I'm going to push the pins down all around the edge, and then this will help to keep it nice and firm, because as we work round the 4 sides, we are going to have to either push pins down or take them out, otherwise they will get in the way. So I'm going to push all the edge pairs down, and then I'm going to push down the rest of the pins for the first fan, the pins for the first spider, the first part of that trail, and the pins for the second spider. But I'm not going to push down this left hand line that I'm going to be working from. So we've just got a few pins pushed down. It helps keep the lace nice and neat, and it stops you pulling on them when you tension and pulling it out of shape. So the next video will be starting and working this second section.